Good afternoon, everybody. Alex here again today to welcome you to this afternoon's live webinar from the Festival of Enterprise. Hope you're all doing well. I can see we've got people from all over the country. I'm joined here by Gabby MacSweeney, Account Director at Fluidly. We are talking getting cash flow savvy during COVID-19, how to stay afloat, save time and plan ahead. Welcome to you, Gabby.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Remind me, whereabouts are you broadcasting from yourself?
I am in North London here, actually. Yeah, in my home office, aka my bedroom. So
very good. Yeah, I've now got a home office in our front room during the last 8, 9, 10 weeks. So yeah, welcome everybody. I've posted a poll up. If you click the button that says polls, let us know your answer if you haven't already. So at the moment, the question is, who has a system now for managing cash flow? I have one in Excel, or I use my bank statements to gauge how much cash I have, or I don't do any forecasting or planning or other. At the moment, 83% is I have one in Excel. Okay. So, wow, we literally have got a whole bunch of people in here. So, brilliant. Thank you for joining us. We've got Polly at home in Telford, West Midlands. We've got Catherine in Broadstairs, Kent, Terence in the West Midlands, John in Donegal in Ireland, Amanda hiding out in Warwick. We've got Paul Drabble, who's chained to the desk in Gloucestershire. I hope you get that released by the end of tomorrow. Paul, for the weekend. Jazz, welcome to you again, my friend, from Wet and Windy Wolves. It's always wet and windy in Wolves when you're posting up, isn't it? Paul, me too. The Wendy effect, a very damp Staffordshire. Well, it's glorious sunshine here in Poole, but it wasn't earlier, I have to say, and it's very, very windy. Michael's in Coalport, bottom of the Iron Bridge Gorge. Sharon in the Garden of England, and in Kent, Socky from my hometown of Cardiff. Wet and windy. It's always wet and windy in Cardiff, Socky. Sharon from South Berks, Julia, and Tadane, who's Ted in Stoke-on-Trent. And also those of you who are watching, we're broadcasting live on Facebook, on Twitter, and YouTube as well. If you'd like to jump on here and have a little bit more engagement and interaction with Gabby and myself, dive on over via the Festival of Enterprise to register for this webinar. But welcome if you are watching it on your phone on social media. So Piers is in the sunny Scottish borders. Helen's in Bucks as well, but it's sunny. Awesome. So with that introduction, and if you have contributed to our poll, wow, it's gone up to 60. It's dropped down to 64.7%, but that's because more of you are voting Excel, and we've got 23% other. Okay. So just to let you know, Gabby.
Mysterious other. Awesome.
Mysterious other, I know.
Great. So should we kick off then?
Yeah, let's go for it. If you've got any other, pop it in the chat box maybe. Let Gabby and myself know what else you could be using. It's interesting to know. And yeah, we are all here. We are all active ears and eyes. Gabby, take it away.
Great. Well, first of all, yeah, big welcome to everyone on the webinar. It's great to see so many of you. And also thank you to the Festival of Enterprise for inviting me to speak today. As Alex said, my name is Gabby MacSweeney. So I'm an account director at Fluidly. And what that means is that I generally look after all of our kind of large and strategic accounting partners to really help them to use Fluidly with their small business clients. So just a quick look at what we're going to cover on the session today. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction to us at Fluidly, and then we're really going to start with the basics. So why is cash flow important? Why should you care about your cash flow? And then where to start really in terms of managing cash flow, the kind of ABC, as I like to call it, of all the things that you should be thinking about in terms of your cash flow. And then I'll actually show you Fluidly and give you a bit of a rundown of how we can help with that as well. And finally, we'll finish with a Q&A. So please do start putting those messages into the chat, store them all up, and we'll come to as many as we can at the end. So first of all, a brief introduction to Fluidly. So we are a fintech startup based in London. We were founded back in 2016, and we launched our first product to market at the end of 2017. So since then, we've been on a pretty exciting growth journey, and we now have around 20,000 businesses connected to our platform. Over the last couple of years, we've raised around £14 million in external funding. So about half and half, that is split between a venture capital investment. So we're backed by leading US and UK investors, but also from government grant funding for our breakthrough AI technology. So why was Fluidly founded? So we were actually founded by a serial entrepreneur called Caroline Plum. And Caroline Plum had a couple of businesses of her own prior to founding Fluidly that she'd built up to around about 80 people. And the idea from Fluidly was really born out of the kind of pain and hassle that Caroline had on a day-to-day basis of managing the cash flow of her own businesses. And by managing the cash flow, I mean those things like actually working out how much cash you're going to have in the bank at the end of the month, you know, whether you've got plenty left over to pay that VAT bill, or you know, make your payroll payments, and actually what would happen if that big invoice that you're counting on doesn't come into the bank. And those kind of day-to-day problems of kind of understanding cash and getting a future view of that turned out impact a huge number of businesses. So managing cash flow is proven to be one of the biggest single financial pain points for businesses across the world. So according to stats from the US bank, 82% of failed businesses quote poor cash flow management skills or understanding as one of the reasons for that. And managing cash flow is also something that's fundamentally very emotional. So that kind of worrying about paying those key bills, cash you've got coming into the bank, but also actually whether you could be putting your money to better use, is something that more than 2/3 of business owners have said that they've lost sleep over at night. And that was before coronavirus. So I think, you know, you can't have not seen the stats that have been touted throughout all of the press recently. I think one of the most recent ones I saw was that, according to The Guardian, 6 out of 10 UK businesses have fewer than 12 weeks cash reserves. And so I think it's fair to say that the pandemic has really brought the issue of understanding, forecasting, and managing cash flow into sharp focus. And I think this is a particularly interesting slide that really illustrates that. This is the search term volume for the term business loan, and you can see just around the end of March this absolutely spiking here as business owners all over the world, well, in United Kingdom, kind of panicking about having enough cash in the bank. So before we go on to a bit more detail of the kind of the how and the why of managing cash flow, I just wanted to circle back on this question and get a final picture of the kind of responses to this. So who listening to the webinar has already got a system in place for managing cash flow? So if you haven't answered the poll, please do go and do that now, and hopefully I'll get her kind of final answer from Alex as to the results coming in from this. So is the answer, you know, I've already got a cash flow forecast in Excel. Maybe you update that on a relatively regular basis and input the extra details there. Is the answer B, you're just looking at your bank balance, you've got an idea of, you know, what's a good amount of money to have in your business bank account for you, and actually you use that kind of threshold in your head to think, actually I'm going to have to not pay this invoice next week, I've got it next week, I'm going to leave it till next month, or actually I really need to be chasing that person who owes me that money? Is it C, you don't do any forecasting or planning at all, or is it D, something else? So maybe you've already got another piece of software that you use, or something along those lines. And if the answer is other, if you could pop that some details of that in the chat, that would be really, really useful.
So
and what's the final impact?
Gabby. Yeah. It's been moving. So we've got moving up and down as I speak. But you've got, funnily enough, like I said when we were speaking earlier this morning, about 50% of people normally who are on the webinar live will take part in this, and is literally exactly the same. 50% of people have put an answer up. So if you're in the other 50%, please dive over, literally click the polls button and let Gabby know. But at the moment, we've got 65% Excel. We've got 10% don't do any, 5% I use my bank statements, and 20% other.
Interesting. So I think really interesting from there that a lot of people on this webinar, probably the majority of this webinar, are already kind of managing their cash in some way. So, you know, those, it seems like the minority of those who've said B and C kind of starting to think about cash flow, but not really doing anything at the moment. But it's clear that those people already creating an Excel spreadsheet have really understood the importance of it for their business, and have kind of put some time into that already. So that's really, really great to see. So I kind of kicked off with the fact that, you know, managing cash flow is something that's crucially important for all businesses, but there are also certain types of business that are have a particular need to have that iron grip around cash. So examples of businesses like that would be ones with a high working capital cycle. So by that we mean that things are taking a long time to move from kind of move to cash. So for example, you could be a construction worker or construction business, and you're buying a lot of materials up front, paying lots of staff, but actually it takes you 3 months to complete a project, and then you don't get paid till a month after that. Or maybe you're working in e-commerce and you work with the likes of Amazon, and you're selling all of your stock up front, and you're having to front the cost for that stock, but actually Amazon don't pay you until kind of 90 days after that stock's been sold. Another example of businesses that have to keep a really tight handle on cash is if you've got a high level of debt. So if you've already got some kind of existing loan, or you're using invoice financing or something like that, there's a real need from a kind of reporting standpoint as well to keep a close eye on that. Or maybe it's just that you have tight margins. So say if you're running a shop and you are buying things at wholesale, selling them on at a small increase in costs, there's actually not a lot of additional cash in your business. So a need to keep a real close eye on that. Or even on the positive note, if you're a high growth business. So if things are changing from month to month really fast, and you are growing really quickly, you're much more likely to see those peaks and troughs in your cash flow that could catch you out. But it's not all doom and gloom. So if you get it right, managing cash flow can really benefit your business. Firstly, as you might be now, you're in survival mode. Managing your cash flow well will help you understand where your key costs are and which ones you could and should cut. But going past that, when you get back into growth mode, managing your cash flow well also allows you to know when and how fast you can be growing. So it means that you're not just kind of keeping extra buffer in your bank because you're not quite sure what's coming around the corner. You can really optimize your cash flow to maximize your growth. If you are managing your cash flow well, you're far less likely to be caught out by unexpected costs that could put your business into jeopardy. And also in the longer term, being able to demonstrate this will certainly make your business more attractive to investors and lenders. So where should you start then? So this is what I call the kind of ABC of cash flow management. And the step one of starting to think about this is really understanding where you are now and your future cash position. Once you're at that stage, you can first think about optimizing cash in, optimizing cash out or your spending, and then finally thinking about external credit and finance. And I'm just now going to dive into each one of these sections and try to cover a few kind of pragmatic hints and tips for managing your cash flow in this way. So first of all, in terms of understanding your current position and starting to build up a picture of the future, the very first place to start is getting the data right about your account. So hopefully most of you listening should be using some kind of accounting software. And regular reconciliation is really is the first thing to do to get you to the starting point of being able to manage and understand your cash flow. Little and often is the way to go. If you leave it for 3 months, it can seem a really big job, but actually if you spend a few minutes once a week, then that will give you the best results, and also should be a really quick task to do. Once you've done that and you actually understand your data is reflecting your bank account and your accounting software is saying the same thing, start thinking about the next few weeks and months of your cash flow by possibly splitting those things into kind of known ingoings and outgoings and estimating the unknowns. So in terms of knowns, the first things to start in terms of forecasting your cash flow are those things like the invoices that have already been raised and are actually coming up, are due, that you need to pay, or are coming in that you know about. And also the very regular kind of direct debits costs that are pretty similar and paid or incoming each month. Now, known things in your cash flow, actually, one of the hardest things about it is that there can often be a number of unknowns as well. So, and generally we would advise people to then start estimating the unknowns based on having a think about what has happened in the past. Now, some people in this stage, I think it's worth saying that some people like to use their cash flow forecast as the very worst case scenario, so that they know that if the cash flow forecast is showing survival, anything on top of that is always going to be better than that cash flow forecast shows. So it's going to be a better picture. So if that is the case, you may want to start with pretty much all knowns on your cash flow forecast and not being too optimistic or ambitious with those unknowns. For example, like expecting a regular month of revenue to come. Finally, don't confuse your P&L and your cash flow. So one of the most common mistakes I see business owners making, and when they come to have a look at Fluidly as well, is placing payments or incoming money into their cash flow when they've raised an invoice, rather than when the kind of payment terms are for their invoices, say 14 or 30 days later. So when thinking about actual cash in the bank, it's about when your customers actually pay you, when you put out that money, rather than what you would see on your profit and loss. So next, moving on to optimizing your cash in. And one of the key levers you can pull really on this aspect is keeping on top of the people that owe you money. So first of all, the key thing about this is prioritization. So in terms of prioritizing who to be following up on, who to be reminding that they owe you money. You could think about a couple of things. So firstly, how overdue it is, but also the what the value is. So in terms of thinking about that kind of prioritization, think about where you can make the most impact. For example, rather than thinking and prioritizing solely by just by how overdue something is, you may want to think about where you can have the most impact. So if you've already been chasing something for months and months and months, it's really, really overdue, you might instead want to focus on getting the payment in for something that's less overdue, but is a bigger ticket value, because that's going to have the biggest impact on your cash flow. Second of all, regular reminders, regular gentle reminders is the way to have the most successful credit control. So in similar way to your reconciliation, make sure that your debtor management processes are regular processes, and that way you will not have to spend the most time on them, and it will be the most effective. So think about sending reminders weekly, even starting as early as possible when things have maybe just gone overdue, as a friendly reminder to say, we're expecting this payment, can you let me know when it will be paid? And on our Fluidly blog, we have got some overdue payment reminder templates that you can have a look and factor into your own debtor management there. And then finally on this one, escalation. So have a system and a plan in place for escalating when things are still not getting paid on time. So who are you going to copy into that email? What is your final resort? Have a plan of action that is agreed internally in your business. So next, we're moving on to optimizing cash out. So one of the big areas of managing your spending is in inventory management. Now, this is not necessarily, not every single business will have inventory, but it certainly is important for those that do. So when you're thinking about your spending and then buying of stock, always think about managing that on a first in, first out basis. So avoid stock getting too old and losing seasonal relevance. It's particularly important to watch high value items and really carefully think about forecasting how many of those that you will need to have in stock and that you're going to need to deliver. Sometimes businesses are worried that if they don't carry that extra stock, they may well be in the position where they're losing out on sales because they actually can't reorder stock and get it in fast enough. So if that is you, just be aware of kind of communicating with your suppliers in advance. So the more warning that you give them, even that you're going to be putting in an order, if you don't exactly know how much or what it is yet, can help them speed up those delivery times. And a final point to say on kind of optimizing your cash out. I just wanted to cover, particularly the kind of situation now. So if you do find yourself in a tight situation in terms of costs building up and invoices building up that you have to pay to your key suppliers, make sure you speak to your suppliers before kind of taking any action or just not paying certain invoices. I think now more than ever, people are in quite an understanding position and can start to make, have made allowances around kind of payment plans or being able to agree the deferment of certain payments. And so it's worth trying to understand your options in that area before making any decisions. So finally, reviewing your finance options or external financing. So at the moment, we are although during a terrible pandemic, we are lucky in some respects that the UK government have put in quite a number of measures to support small businesses at this time. So first of all, make sure you know everything that is available to you in terms of external finance. So government grants, which government payments can you defer, like your VAT or your business rates. And then there is, if you decide after that position that you do need to consider external funding, then the first thing to think about is the specific coronavirus schemes. So we've got some more guides on this on our website in terms of eligibility. And you can actually also on the Fluidly website put in your own business details and understand how much money you might qualify for across those CBILS lenders and what you might be able to receive. But also equally, it's worth saying that CBILS and bounce back loans are only in place for a relatively small number of lenders in the UK. So not all businesses may be eligible for those things, and there are many other finance options available, even if that's not the right scheme for you. So don't forget things like invoice factoring, revolving credit facilities, or other options like that. So there's a kind of few tips in terms of managing cash flow there. I now just wanted to give you a quick overview of Fluidly and how we help businesses to get better control of their financial future. So Fluidly is at Fluidly, we really are on a mission to help small businesses sleep better at night by providing more control, confidence around cash flow. And to do that, we've created tools that make it easier to look ahead and to get cash in the bank when it's needed. So we focus on 3 areas. So what's coming up next? So what does that really mean for your business? And now what can you do to start improving your cash flow? And now I'm just going to skip in and just give you a quick overview of the Fluidly platform. So I mentioned those 3 areas of kind of what's coming up next, so what, and now what can I do about it? And the foundation of Fluidly is really in its AI-powered cash flow forecast. So Fluidly connects to your accounting software, so it connects to either Xero or QuickBooks. And what it does is it uses that information to produce a cash flow forecast for you automatically in the first instance. So it will give you a year's worth of historic cash flow data there in yellow that you can see all the way down to the individual transactions. And what it will also do is try to get you as far as possible to actually building a cash flow forecast without you having to put any work in the first instance. So what Fluidly does is it uses historic patterns to create automatic projections for your cash flow, and then allows you to quickly edit and add to those predictions to build up what you know to be true in your cash flow. So Fluidly will actually work off the historic information, firstly, to place any of your outstanding invoices into your cash flow based on how particular customers have paid in the past. But what it will also do is analyze every single one of your historic transactions in your accounting software. And it will try to spot patterns in that historic data. So, for example, have you made a payment to E.ON Energy for your energy bill last month? Are you paying them on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? And if so, roughly how much are you paying them? Fluidly will then, if it can spot those kind of patterns, Fluidly will then give you a view of that in the future, how much is due it thinks will be paid and who it's going to come from as well. So that's the kind of Fluidly cash flow forecast. Within Fluidly, you can also create basic scenarios for understanding different things that might happen. Particularly useful at this time, we've got the ability to create a plan or a scenario around keeping the business above water. So with this, you can actually build on top of your base cash flow forecast to use kind of sliders to adjust certain account lines, certain customers and suppliers, or even your revenue as a whole. And you can then see the impact that you have, that's going to have on the cash that you have in the bank. as well as kind of breaking that down for your business. As I said, Fluidly helps you to try and start to improve your cash flow from there. So we have a section in Fluidly that helps you prioritize and more efficiently chase the invoices that are due to you in this chase section here, where you can kind of automatically trigger invoices and keep notes on who you have chased about the payments to you. And we also help businesses get funding when they need it as well. So based on the data in your accounting software, as well as publicly available data, what Fluidly will do is match you to your personalized funding options. And if you're interested, you can request a call back for one of our specialists who can take you through the whole process of receiving funding. So I'm pretty sure that brings me to the end of everything I was going to say to you today about Fluidly. So I think I think now we can probably move on to the Q&A part of today. So Alex, I don't know if is there any particular questions that you've got on your end, or should I just start picking some up from the chat? Okay, so I am going to just start with some of these questions I can see here in front of me. Brilliant. Explain again the mistake made by owners as it relates to P&L and cash flow. Okay, so just to recap again on one of the kind of common mistakes that I see business owners making when they're thinking about creating a cash flow forecast. Generally, in terms of thinking about the revenue for your business and the kind of sales in a business, people will think on a accruals basis. So they will start counting that revenue at the point where they have signed a contract, the person has agreed to pay, but actually you haven't got the cash in the bank yet. So what I see people doing, if I had a look at their cash flow forecast, is you say, right, well, it's June this month. I think our revenue forecast that deals we're going to close in June this month is £20,000. So I'm going to put in there £20,000 to my cash flow forecast. But actually, winning that £20,000 is all of those customers are on 30-day payment terms. So actually, the vast majority of that money will come into your bank account in July, and that's where you should see it in your cash flow forecast. So I've got a question here as well about how far forward Fluidly can make predictions. So there's two different versions of Fluidly, Fluidly Standard and Fluidly Starter. With Fluidly Starter, you can see 3 months ahead, and with Fluidly Standard, you can see 12 months ahead. So what accountancy software do you recommend for a very small new business? So at Fluidly, we're kind of agnostic in terms of accounting software, and the ones that we integrate with are Xero and QuickBooks. And I think it's fair to say that if you use Xero or QuickBooks accounting software, you've certainly got the most available to you in terms of extra tools to manage your finances. However, as well as Xero and QuickBooks, particularly for very small businesses and contractors, there is one called Free Agent as well, which generally comes for you free, I believe, if you bank with NatWest. Okay, let's have a look at some of those other questions. Is the Fluidly support approach for businesses the same for startups? So I'm going to interpret that question to say, I think, Jazz, what you mean is what about it? Are there any specifics to think about in terms of forecasting your cash flow for startups? And please do just put another note in the chat if that's not quite what you mean. So one of the things with startups is that it can be very, very hard to forecast because things are changing so quickly, and especially if you are forecasting kind of pre-revenue, it's really all about cost and runway, and even those costs can be increasing very, very quickly. I think with regards to that, though, it's still very important to do that. As I mentioned, those kind of high growth companies are businesses that really particularly need to be worried and careful about their cash flow. Okay, moving on here. Do you keep enhancing the prediction model with your software, or is it a one size fits all approach that's adopted here? So I'm definitely not going to get in over my head and start to try and explain to you in detail the kind of predictions model of Fluidly, as that is, we've got a special kind of data science team who have developed that, and it is actually patent pending at the moment. So it is complex, but it should work for multiple different types of businesses as well. The best way to actually really have a look at it is to just connect your company up to Fluidly and really just have a look and have a look at what's in there, because you can see all the detail in the historic information and in the cash flow projections as well. So it looks like Alex is still on permanent mute. So I will try and work through and see if there are any other further questions down here. So if there aren't any other further questions, I just wanted to say that Fluidly have made a special offer to the Festival of Enterprise, that you can firstly get Fluidly Starter for £10 a month. But if you do quote Festival of Enterprise and email support@Fluidly, you can also get a free one-to-one video call with someone to personally walk you through setting up your own cash flow forecast and analysing your debtors. So that email address there is support@Fluidly, which I've added in here. And this is my email address as well. Final question from Ritesh. To use Fluidly, does the business need to be using accounting software, or can an Excel spreadsheet be used to input into Fluidly? So that's a really good point, and unfortunately at the moment you do need to be using accounting software in order to use Fluidly, because what Fluidly does is it actually constantly updates and keeps that data live so that your cash flow can be monitored on a live basis. And then someone else has just asked to have a look at one of the slides back here in terms of why managing cash flow is good news. So surviving, reviving and growing, getting no surprises, and then thriving as well. So really, the reasons why it's a good idea to manage cash flow is about understanding where you can make savings, understanding how fast you can grow, not getting caught out by unexpected costs, and making your business look attractive in the longer term. Plenty more questions coming through here, which is great to see. How many months minimum of historical data does Fluidly need to create a cash flow? So the general rule for Fluidly is that it will need 3 data points in order to start predicting a pattern. So actually, when you've got 3 weeks worth of regular data, it'll start picking up weekly patterns. Once you've got 3 months of regular data, you'll start picking up monthly patterns. And if you want to start spotting quarterly patterns, then you'll need 9 months. Generally, I would say if as long as you've got 3 months of historic data, you'll be able to see something in Fluidly. And if you've got kind of 6 months to 9 months plus, then you'll start to get some really good projections. Great. So hopefully, Alex, if you, I will see if you can sign off the webinar today. Yeah. Or if you want me to do it, and if you can't speak, and I'll just say to everyone, thank you so much for joining and taking the time today. I'll just leave you with my my email address there. If you've got anything you want to specifically ask about, you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, and do email support@Fluidly. I'll go to fluidly.com to set up your own Fluidly account.